She has verbally expressed to me she thought about me and just always wished that I was doing well. At one point, she had approached her parents saying, I think I want to keep my baby. I don't want to relinquish my baby. And she recalls her mother looking at her like, who do you think you are that you could care for a baby?
Who am I?
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 This is Who Am I, Really? A podcast about adoptees that have located and connected with their biological family members. I'm Damon Davis, and you're about to meet Angie. She called me from Southern Maryland. Growing up, Angie was frequently defined by her skin tone, as her relation to her adoptive parents was questioned, and her contrast against her schoolmates and surrounding community made her stand out. When Angie found her birth mother, she was welcomed home, even by the woman responsible for her placement. But her paternal reunion was marked by an unremarkable connection and vitriolic remarks that made Angie take control of who she keeps in her life. This is Angie's journey. When we started, Angie was concerned that her dog Cash was going to be disruptive. So when you hear his voice in the background, just know that Cash with a K is sitting there right next to Angie. Moving to her adoption, Angie was raised as an only child with a large extended family here in Maryland. Her parents are Black, like herself, but that doesn't mean that she easily passed as their biological child. Angie didn't know she was adopted until one of the children at school pointed out the obvious difference in appearance between her and her parents. Soon it was clear that everyone could see what that child saw in their family.
Kids at school who pointed out that I didn't look anything like my parents, who were both very brown, told me I could not be their real child and I must have been adopted. So I brought up to my mother and asked her, like, somebody said I was adopted. What is that? So at about 6 or 7, that happened. And my mom said, yes, in fact, you were adopted. So that's when I knew officially that I was adopted. I was raised as an only child. I had sort of a big family, a few local cousins, went to the local Catholic school. Interesting enough, as in my childhood, went to a local childcare provider after school with all the neighborhood kids, all African American kids, went to Catholic school with all white kids. And so in school, it was the questions about Black and this. And at the aftercare, it was you're white kind of thing.
So just to pause, I want to pause right there to make sure we catch this. What I'm hearing you say is at school, your school was predominantly white, but you as a Black child stood out there.
Stood out in the sense that by second grade, my classmates and others knew that I was Black with Black parents. And so, yes, my family, there were very few Black families and students in that school.
And then in the after school program, back in your home community, not in this private school community, which is an amalgamation of people from all distances, in your after school community, which is back in your neighborhood, it sounds like you're saying that is a Black neighborhood, but you are fairly light-skinned, and therefore it sounds like you stood out a lot there too.
Right. So even with other children who were even close to my complexion, I was Casper. I was the white girl. There was that. Many of them went to maybe the local public school. Some of them went to my Catholic school. I had a cousin that went there as well. But I very much got picked on. So that was one of the maybe less happy points of my childhood. The complexion, the color, the race. I was called the N-word at school, in Catholic school, in grade school, in first grade.
So it sounds like race was a very prevalent theme, because I would imagine that once the child pointed out how your color differed from your parents and you just didn't look like you could be genetically related, you probably saw it then at home as well. So now everywhere you go, it's at school, they treat me a certain kind of way, they call me these names. back in the community, they
Yes.
think that I'm the opposite. And at home, I look at my two parents, both of them darker than me. It's pretty clear I am not theirs. And now that I know I'm adopted, just race was a prevalent construct, it sounds like.
Yes. And I recall asking my mom, and another point is we didn't talk about adoption a lot in my house. Like after that initial conversation, um, maybe a handful of times I can remember that I might have asked my mom, not even my dad, because my dad wasn't present for that initial conversation. It was just between my mom and me. I would ask her a question, one of being which, am I white? And she would say, no, absolutely not.
Mm.
And where I grew up in Southern Maryland, there are families that are very fair skinned, historically mixed with Native American and white and African American. And we come in all shades anyway. My mom was emphatic, no, you're not white. So that was that.
Yeah.
And so I learned very early that bringing up anything about my adoption was uncomfortable for my mom.
How
So
did you learn that? What did that look like?
body language, no eye contact, very limited answers. In the beginning, the standard story, your mom was young, she was unwed, she was too young to take care of you. And that's how we chose you. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Really fascinating. How did that feel then to have this topic? Because I can't help it's impossible now to separate the race thing from the adoption thing, right? They kind of came up together. One led to the other.
that's right.
But now you can't talk about one of them.
That's right.
How was that to have this distance placed between you and your mom on that particular topic?
So I probably wouldn't have had and didn't have words to express it as a child, but just just a lot of distance. Looking back, I know both my parents, my father's still living. My mom has since passed in 2016, loved me unconditionally. And as an only child, showered me with love, not in a precious doll baby, this is our special gift, but just what I felt like a parent would. They fussed at me. I got in trouble, so there was no like special treatment that way. But I just felt the unconditional love from them. But felt very, very different. I just felt the distance, even as probably leading up to preteens, which is developmentally appropriate. But I just started getting very mouthy with my mom, and just the differences. We were just very, very different people, and we argued a lot. So it was a tense relationship for my teens, really all through adulthood. But there was always that distance. And I would think she really can't completely love me because I'm not really hers. Like she loves me, but it would probably be even better. Like she would probably like me even more if I was really hers. Like I remember feeling that way as a child. Like she loves me, but it would be a little bit different
Mm-hmm.
if I were hers.
Yeah.
And so take that mixed with just she and I bumping heads. They were older. Both my parents were very old school and they didn't want to hear a lot of mouth. And so when I didn't dare do that with my dads, but when I would have these back and forth with my mom, it was just like, how dare you speak to me that way? So it was just a lot of bumping of heads.
Yeah. There's so much in there because I was just having a conversation with one of my colleagues recently, and we were talking about how sometimes your kids are just jerks.
Yes.
So I'm like, my son, I'm like, yo, what is wrong with you, bro? Of all the people you should be treating especially nicely, your mother and me? What?
Yes.
So there's a dynamic there that is
Yes.
that. And we
Yes.
were having this interesting conversation because as she was speaking to me, it hit me that in a family, a lot of times, especially when there's a pairing of one daughter and one son, and there's often a crossing of the relationships that the
Yes.
son is the mama's boy and the daughter is the daddy's girl. And it hit me when we were having this conversation that probably part of the reason for that is because in that relationship, you cannot have a father who is the best representation of what a woman should be to that daughter.
Mhm.
Mother is
Mhm.
that. And therefore
Mhm.
there's contention because the girl wants to be her own woman. And so by having a relationship in the house where there is a woman that is already well established. She will always be on top. It's going to be very much harder for a woman and a woman to get along because the younger one is trying to establish herself. And the same thing is true for the son. That
Yeah.
son, he's like, yo, I want to be a man. Stop holding me down. And dad is like, dude, I've been here longer than you.
That's right.
I have more life experience than you. You will never surpass me.
Yes.
So I think that is part of the dynamic that happens with teenagers is their attempt to establish their autonomy with the person of the same sex in their house ends up creating that tension. That's the way it feels to me. And I can't help. So I guess I went on that little diatribe because I wanted to say that part of it was just a piece of you two being women in a family. But then there was also, you probably felt a little more licensed to be mouthy because you did have that adoption undercurrent of, I'm not even yours. So I don't even know. Did you keep the receipt? I don't know if you really are all the way in on this. And you put that in your own head.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, having started processing everything really in my late 40s is one sort of that sabotaging, like how mad can I get her before she really shows me the truth that she doesn't completely. It was kind of pushing it in that way. And, I have to say, she was always there unconditionally. It never got to a point where she ever said anything negative.
So tell me about that testing of the waters. Why do you think you felt like you needed to do that?
I think it was because, I felt untethered. I kind of felt a little bit alone, even though I had both parents, loving parents, but I felt a little bit alone. And I think it was to gain some sort of control. In my mind, I thought saying whatever I want, however I wanted to, acting how I wanted was just a way to maintain control.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be by myself, I'm going to roll myself. I was joking. I was talking to somebody the other day and told them I might have been an early teenager in an argument with my mom before school and said something to the effect of, you can't tell me what to do because I'm the captain of my own ship. Something really ridiculous like that. And I still remember my mother's face. Like she probably was thinking, okay, if I choke her now, I'm going to be late for work. She's going,
Right.
She just gave me this look
Uh-huh.
and just turned on her heels and walked away from me. Probably the best thing, she's probably like, the best thing I can do right now is to not look at this
For
child.
real. I'm sure she was like, well, I wish you would take your ship and unhook it from my dock and get out of my port. Then
All of that.
you ain't paying any bills up in here.
So, as a parent now, I look back and think, oh my God, she really did love me unconditionally because I was horrible.
Yeah.
I was horrible.
Yeah.
A lot of it was just teen, but a lot of it was just that undercurrent of feeling alone, not being able to talk about why I felt alone, not being able to talk about my adoption, feeling like I was trapped in figuring whatever out, which I can't even pinpoint and really say what I was thinking about. Just nobody to talk to about that.
Speaking of her adoptive father, Angie said he was the sweetest guy in the world. She was a daddy's girl, but not in that princess way. She said they cut the grass, tinkered in the garage, and he had a pretty chill personality by comparison to the sassy nature of her adoptive mother. But Angie and her adoptive father never talked about her adoption until she wanted to launch her adoption reunion search when she was an adult. As a teen, exploring her identity and confronting race, Angie's primary thoughts were around getting her independence outside of the strictness of her home. She attended Towson State University, where she met really good friends whom she's still close to this day. I was interested in Angie's desire to search. She went on to say it was near the end of her college days when a close cousin asked Angie to be with her during the delivery of her baby that everything changed for Angie.
In the hospital room, this baby was born, and all of a sudden, just a flood of emotions. I had to know what happened in that room when I was born. Who was with my mother? Did she have anybody? How long was she like? So it just, and it became a little bit of a obsession after that.
This was the mid 1990s, so social media and unlimited access weren't a thing. Angie's younger days of snooping through her parents' belongings revealed that she was adopted through Catholic charities. She was living at home, so when she sent away for her non-identifying information, Angie had that information package mailed to her best friend's house to avoid detection. Angie was born in Washington, D.C., a municipality where birth records are closed to adoptees. It would have cost hundreds of dollars to hire a lawyer to petition the courts for her records, but a very nice woman at the D.C. Vital Records office told Angie to write down exactly what she needed to submit to petition the court to open her records. Hers was guidance that saved Angie hundreds of dollars in legal fees. Following the process, a social worker from Catholic Charities was allowed to search for Angie's birth mother on her behalf. I asked Angie what it felt like when the social worker shared that she had made a discovery.
Oh my gosh. Very, very emotional. I mean, I still have writings, I was just writing my thoughts out. I saved all those papers because just, I won't say heavy, but there was such anticipation. I remember having dreams about it, trying to think what the meeting would be like, what she would be like. If I had a sister, what she would be like, just all the possibilities. And then, of course, I'd gotten all these books from the library, and some of them had stories that didn't go so well. So that worried me. So just anxious with anticipation. The funny thing is, in the time that I talked with a social worker and she was searching, I took a business trip to the West Coast and was in the same city as my birth mother and never knew it. Came back from that trip, and then I don't know the timing, maybe
Oh, no.
3 weeks, a month later. Yes.
Are you
She said
serious?
she's in San Diego. Yes.
Just the month before you had been there, and you get back, and a month later you find out you were in the city where she was. If that had been better timed, you could have made that business trip a reunion trip. That's insane.
Yeah. I was like, that is crazy.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really wild. So you are alerted that she lives on the West Coast, and she connects you. I assume because you didn't meet her on this business trip as a reunion trip, you must have spoken by phone. How
We
was that
talked.
first conversation?
Wow. My birth mother likes to talk a lot, so I'm sure it was a very long conversation. This is in the 90s, but I still remember just being excited. Just like I could have talked to her all night long. So we had a lot of phone conversations. She was really into letter writing, so she sent me a lot of letters. And I felt comforted in how she explained how everything happened. Turns out she is a white lady. She is white, grew up in a large Irish German Catholic family, and her parents just were not supportive. Although she had graduated from high school and went to an unwed mother's home and turned 19 there just before I was born, her parents were not supportive of her keeping a child, being able to care for a child. They just weren't supportive in that way.
Did you
And
get the sense from her story that it was keeping a child, or that it was keeping a biracial child?
so I think in later years, my birth mother never said anything about that specifically. She did note, like in the non-identifying information, they weren't crazy about my birth father, but she never explicitly said, "You're not going to keep this Black baby." That never came out. But my birth grandmother, whom I did meet, said some interesting things later on about biracial children. But
Uncomfortable things, it sounds like.
well, she just told me that my birth mother had kept a poster of a baby who appeared to be biracial, and she felt like she kept that poster in memory of me or thinking about me, something along those lines.
How did
Yeah.
that make you feel to think that there was a possibility your birth mother was thinking about you, trying to imagine how her child had turned out?
A sense of relief because I don't know, I most likely thought growing up I was just unwanted. I just was unwanted, just tossed. I mean, even now, Damon, sometimes I get angry like, she probably could have worked it out. She probably could have tried a little harder, but I don't feel unwanted. And she has verbally expressed to me, she thought about me and just always wished that I was doing well. At one point, she had approached her parents saying, I think I want to keep my baby. I don't want to relinquish my baby. And she recalls her mother looking at her like, who do you think you are that you could care for a baby? Whether she said those exact words, that was what was intimated.
Sentiment
And yeah.
that was
And
expressed. Yeah.
and her confidence was just crushed, and she just felt like, I have to relinquish this baby. I can't do this on my own.
Yeah. And I was wondering about that piece because you just said, I felt like if she had tried harder,
Mhm.
she could have kept me. But the truth is, you weren't there. You
I
have
know.
no idea what that
I
pressure
know.
felt like for her. I know this is how we sometimes think about things is, oh, I'm sure you could have resisted a little bit more, but there are situations throughout our lives that are not related to adoption, relinquishment at all, where there there can always be an extra effort put forth to change the outcome. But there's also a calculus that goes into that extra effort. And it becomes, how is the rest of my life going to go if I continue down this path? It's a balancing act. If I keep pushing on this side, what am I
Mhm.
going to lose on this side?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I could push to keep this child. And I make no assumptions about the relationship with your birth father, but I could keep pushing to try to keep this child, and this relationship might not even work out. Then where am I? Have I lost my family in trying to keep this child for a relationship that doesn't end up working out? I'm sure she mulled over multiple different scenarios. And this is the challenge we have, that we are making assumptions and we weren't there
Yeah,
and and didn't go through it. And I'm curious along those lines then. Did you read the book The Girls Who Went Away?
I did. I did. And it had such an impact on me, and it really made me rethink a lot of those thoughts I had about my own birth mother and just in general, and just really get a better understanding of what was happening. I was born at the tail end of that baby scoop era,
Mhm.
and really just have a sense of just compassion for all those women who went through that.
Mhm. Yeah, same. It was very eye-opening for me, and especially as a man reading it, because I could never get pregnant. I could never carry a child. Like, I will never have to make a
Mhm.
relinquishment decision in the same
Mhm.
way. And so it was eye-opening for me in that way. And because you said that your birth mother was one of those women, I was wondering how that book impacted you. And I'm glad to know that it gave you some empathy towards her situation.
Yes.
Together. So Angie's birth mother was located on the West Coast, but Angie was a young woman without a lot of disposable income. She scraped together her dollars to buy a plane ticket to make the trip across the country. Angie and her roommate at the time made that cross country trip together to start a week-long adoption reunion. Angie's birth mother and half sister picked the pair up at the airport.
Although I had seen pictures, it was just I mean, I can't tell you what I felt seeing someone that I looked like, and I look a
Really?
lot like her, and I just couldn't stop looking at her. And so it was very touching. I felt very full meeting her there. And then we went to her sister's job. For her to introduce me. And as soon as her sister came out, she said, I know exactly who you are because we look so much alike. And I,
Oh
I
my
just felt
God.
very welcome. I felt very welcome. And at that time, my birth mother was living with her mother, my bio grandmother. And we pulled up, and she was a very short lady, and she just reached her arms out and said, welcome home.
Oh, that's so cute. Oh my gosh.
But I have to say, Damon, that part did not sit well with me.
I can imagine.
Just
It's
thinking about knowing she was really the catalyst and the relinquishment. And I thought, welcome home. I did grow to have a nice relationship with her. I did like her. But that was just a little thing that kind of stuck with me. Like, that's an interesting.
You had said it, I was gonna ask, right?
Yeah.
Because it's very clear that she was the person
Yes.
who was instrumental in your relinquishment from the family. But
Yes.
it was genuine when I said that is really cute that she said that, because these are years and years and years later.
That's right.
And the situation has changed. It's possible that she could have some remorse, regret, or other feeling that is counter to what she felt in the moment. And
Mhm.
one would hope that some piece of that was reconciliation with you to be able to say genuinely welcome home, right? I
Sure.
would hope.
Sure. And of course, my birth was in the early 70s. Within the family, there were other interracial relationships and children. So I'm thinking she's gotten to her years, like, even if we tried to stop before, there's no stopping. Like, so she'd come to terms or just whatever she worked out on her end.
Yeah.
But the entire family was very welcoming. I remember they planned just like a backyard cookout, and it wasn't overwhelming. I hear a lot of reunion stories too, where it's like, oh, all these people came, and there were people there, but I did not feel that anyone was looking at me like that freak is part of our family. It was not, it was just very welcoming. It was very relaxing. And I couldn't have asked for a better first time interaction.
The topic of birth fathers can be sensitive for birth mothers, but when Angie asked about the man from her past, Angie said her birth mother cared for him a lot back then. However, he had a girlfriend that her birth mother didn't know about. When she got pregnant, it was clear he was not interested in being involved with her birth mother anymore. He made it clear he was indifferent about the pregnancy, and Angie's birth father went on to marry the other woman. Angie said the man's wife was not receptive to her emergence from their past. Her birth mother didn't help her connect with the man either, and Angie didn't have the patience to wait for another Catholic Charities search, so she took to sleuthing on her own, and it turned out he wasn't living far from her back on the East Coast. Angie wrote the man a letter that included her phone number and put it in his mailbox. Angie shares the story of her first call with her birth father.
It was interesting. It was interesting. He didn't show really any emotion about it. This is a funny thing that I always remember that, like, within the first 10 minutes of the conversation, he told me that addiction ran in our family. So I guess that was his contribution to tell me, like, I guess health information. Because in my letter, I said, I don't want anything. I just want to know who you are. And I'm interested in health information and just to know where I come from. So he's like, addiction runs in our family. And I thought, okay. And there wasn't a whole lot of substance to the conversation. I remember, I guess, feeling underwhelmed with what he had to say. And so he told me a little bit about the family. I have his three daughters. So I have three half siblings on my paternal side. And that was kind of it. I think maybe in that conversation we planned to meet. So I had one of my male friends just go with me just because I'm meeting this guy, supposedly he's my birth father, but I don't know him. Just we met, I think, at a mall very briefly. I never got the impression he was terribly really interested.
How did it go when you sort of first saw each other?
I don't look like him at all. And so seeing him in person, I just thought, is she sure this is the guy? But I didn't feel any connection. I didn't. He brought a big picture of himself to show me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Narcissistic much?
Yes. So it was a short meeting,
Yeah.
and I just remember it being short and very underwhelming.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking to myself that this is a guy who got a woman pregnant and didn't care enough to be involved at that time. And that he basically was consistent. He carried it right through to your meeting. And I couldn't help thinking to myself, well, that was probably comforting that you didn't look like him, right? Imagine if you didn't
Yes.
look like your birth mother, you did look like him, but you had no connection with him. So now you're walking around the rest of your life going, God, I look like this guy, and I don't like we have no connection. You know what I mean?
Right. That's exactly right. Yes, that you hit that head on. I wanted to go on to share just, maybe not so happy part of that side of the reunion is shortly after that meeting, his wife got in touch with me and verbally let me know how upset she was about my existence. And so here was just a blatant point of misdirected anger. She didn't know that he was seeing my birth mother back then. So here I come 22 years later. She has children. She immediately launches into, we don't have money for you. We're not going to do anything for you. And then, what, I was talking to her because I said, this must be sort of upsetting. I can imagine if a wife doesn't know that her boyfriend at the time, anyway. So I was just trying to talk her through it. And so she asked a lot of questions about who my birth mother was. And I don't think she even knew who she was because they were all kind of like in the neighborhood together, is what I gather. Then she said, I guess she got to a point where she just had enough and just, I don't know. She said, poor little white baby. Nobody wanted you then, and nobody wants you now.
Ew.
And that was probably the most hurtful thing I've ever heard in my entire life. So that's when I pretty much chose to sever the relationship with my birth father. He circled back and apologized, and I thought, there's no fixing this. And he said, I want you to meet your sisters. And I said, I can't imagine after that conversation your wife would even be okay with that. I'm just done. We just can't talk. And so years went by before I even had any other contact with him. But I felt like that's what I needed to do. And that's part of that control. I'm controlling this. Birth father or not, that felt toxic and hurtful. And I really didn't see him doing a lot to heal. He wasn't being.
He wasn't refereeing the thing at all.
No,
Right.
He wasn't intentional about healing wounds. It seemed very selfish from his perspective, and so I used my control, and I just severed that relationship for a long time.
That's
Yeah.
really interesting. Can I ask you, how did you get through or get over her vitriol? That's some toxic stuff to say to a person.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know how you got past that.
Even when I think about it, because I can remember exactly where I was standing, she called my job. I can remember exactly where I was standing, having that conversation, and it's still upsetting. But as a woman, I understand feeling that level of betrayal, that sense of anger. It was misdirected. It's still hurtful that she said that to me, but I knew she felt betrayed and angry and could do nothing about it, right? Like what's done is done. I was here. And if she couldn't have whatever conversation with her husband, I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for her.
Yeah.
But I have since met all three of those half sisters.
Oh, yeah.
And as I understand it to this day, she's still not completely happy. She is not pleased that I have a relationship with my middle sister. She and I speak the most, and we visit sometimes sporadically over the years. But, we stay in touch through social media and such. Her mother is aware that she and I have a relationship, and she's not happy about it. But, my sister says that the mom understands that she's going to do what she wants anyway as an adult, and she chooses to have a relationship with her sister, and that's that.
Yeah. Sound like she said, I'm going to control this. The same way that you're saying it, right?
Yeah, that's
Not too
exactly
drastically
right.
different. Really interesting. And that's a really good point about how the maternal and paternal siblings are able to make a choice on their own. It's complicated though, because I'm sure on their side, the calculus is, how pissed is my mom going to be if I pursue this relationship, especially if she has told me, girl, you should have heard how I told her off or whatever. Like, it's clear that I am not a fan of this person, or at least the situation that brought this
Yeah.
person to our door.
Yeah.
And then the decision for them to pursue the relationship anyway can have its own challenges for them and their family. And it's admirable that she has taken on your relationship. And I would imagine that's somewhat fulfilling as well.
It is. And how she and I actually connected was through Facebook. She and I actually went to the same college years apart, but popped up through like our alumni group as somebody I might know. And I recognized the last name. I recognized her name.
What?
And
That's crazy.
a couple weeks went by, and I said, I think you're my sister. So that's how she and I connected. And so it's been a nice relationship.
After Angie was well on her way with her adoption reunion search, she decided she needed to tell her adoptive parents what she was doing. When she told her mom, the woman basically said, okay, not really for or against what Angie needed to do. When Angie told her dad, he was more open and supportive and asked her to let him know what she learned along the way.
I felt a sense of relief that it was out there. A little sad that my mom still kind of had those, I guess, had that feeling. And I don't know what exactly the feeling was. She never articulated, I feel threatened, or I feel, like you're betraying me. I just never heard. It was just the body language that it was not comfortable. And I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I don't think I hurt her feelings, but I still very strongly felt like this is something that I want to do and something that I need to do.
You just sparked something for me. There's a bit of a full circle piece of this conversation. You said she never clearly expressed how she was feeling about your reunion attempt. But at the beginning of this conversation, you said you didn't have the language to express certain feelings around your adoption and race and things like that. And it just occurred to me that sometimes when our adoptive parents are responding or not responding in a certain kind of way, it also could be because they don't have the language.
That's true.
They've probably never been through adoption reunion before, an attempt by one of their adopted children to reunite with their first family. And so if they'd been through it before, they would have the language to say, listen, the last time I went through this, I remember this is how I felt. Never having been through it before, though, they're not going to have that language.
That's right.
And so the same way that a child is not able to express some of their feelings about adoption and attempts at reunion and just whatever they're going through, I can see how an adult would similarly not have that language and not be in a position to say, I was fearful this day would come. I was worried that you were not loved. I'm concerned that you're going to replace me. All of the things that we know they're probably thinking probably aren't able to articulate it.
And think about it, at that time, I would imagine there were zero, if any, very, very few little support for adoptive parents to think about if this day comes, when this day comes. Just working through that, there was no support like there is today.
Yeah.
They were told to assimilate the child, which I always go back to, which is hilarious because I don't look anything like my parents. You're just told to bring the child home, pretend like it's your child, assimilate, and move on.
Yeah.
And don't think about it. Birth mothers, don't think about it. Move on with your life.
Yeah. It's funny. I just interviewed a woman named Julie who was also adopted through Catholic Charities. And she said that the charity attempted to place children with parents that resembled the birth parents. And she remarked how astonishing it was, how much her birth and adoptive mother looked similar to each other.
Wow.
But I realize as you're speaking, that's almost impossible to do with a mixed race child, where when a baby comes onto this earth, they all kind of look alike, right? They're all relatively the same color and to a degree. And so it would be very difficult for anybody to place a mixed race child who is going to end up, sort of towards the darker or lighter side of skin tone spectrum without knowing that, without seeing how the child is going to develop. And so it hit me that I just had a conversation with Julie about being adopted through Catholic Charities, how much she looked like her adoptive family versus your situation, Angie, in contrast. I'd love to ask one final thing, because you've touched on the relationship with your adoptive mother, how loving it was, but how challenging it was not to be able to talk about adoption. You never talked about it with your adoptive father, but he was also loving. We've also closed with the idea that an adoptive parent might not have the language to express how they're feeling as you're going through reunion. I'm curious what kinds of advice you would offer to an adoptive parent out there as they're thinking about their teen daughter, their adult daughter who might be contemplating reunion, or their child who eventually is going to come to them one day and say, am I adopted? And what does that mean? What advice would you offer to an adoptive parent who might be listening out there to do things differently the way you needed it?
I'm glad you asked that question. I'll roll back a little bit and say, really, a lot of the processing I've started to do came about within the past 5 or 6 years through my work. So I was working as a family peer support specialist, helping families with children with behavioral health concerns navigate the system. And through a lot of training with trauma in early childhood, someone mentioned that adoption was trauma. And I thought, it is? And I just never heard that before. It was 2018. It was the first time I heard anyone say adoption was trauma. So that's when I sort of like diving in, reading the podcast and just trying to figure out myself. At the same time, while supporting families, several foster parents and adoptive parents came under my purview. We don't call it a caseload, just that I began to serve. And I thought, this is fascinating because I was able to talk to those foster and adoptive parents and tell them what a child might feel like. I had my own story. I had started hearing many other stories through podcasts and sharing, but I was able to talk to them what a child might be thinking, and really get into just tell the truth. Of course, these were young. Many of them were very young children. Some being raised by their grandparents due to incarcerated parents, or just tell the truth. There's an age appropriate way to do it, but just talk about it. Normalize it from the beginning. Don't use the cutesy phrases like your tummy mommy and things like that. Just tell the truth and be open. And when they talk, listen. As a child is going to be thinking about it, I would always say, you're an amazing grandmother. You've done the selfless thing of taking on raising this child, but you have to understand that you don't replace mom. Pop doesn't replace dad. And you could have the best relationship with the child, but that loss will always be there. So I talk to them a lot about loss and the grief and wondering and that loss of control of knowing. So if you have the truth, tell the truth.
Interesting. If you have the truth, tell the truth. And what if you don't have the truth?
I mean, I would share that if the child is ever curious, give the child as much information as you have. If the child is even more curious and you don't have the information, be supportive of helping them to find it one day if they're interested. If they're not, just to be the support system and let the child be the lead, let the child be the voice, and let them be the captain of that ship. But always be truthful, because it's the lies and the secrecy that they destroy.
I agree.
They destroy relationships, they destroy trust, they destroy so much.
Yep. You're absolutely right. That's wonderful advice. Well, Angie, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. I hope you will spend some time doing some writing. I think that the kind of work you have done and your adoptee experience has a nice pull through for you to put some really strong content out there that'll be helpful for a lot of parents and a lot of adopted kids and foster children and others too. So take some time and create that stuff. You're going to have a very unique perspective on it as a biracial person and with some of the things that you illuminated here. So I wanted to say thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Damon. I appreciate it.
Hey, it's me. Angie grew up with a lot of focus on her ethnicity, from the differences in her skin tone against her adoptive parents, and her community, where she was lighter than most Black people, and in school, where most of the children were white. When she found her birth mother, Angie was welcomed home by everyone, from the tiny grandmother who was responsible for Angie's adoption to the backyard barbecue, full of family members, including her birth mother. Angie's birth father only gave a half-hearted effort to try to make things work, but his wife slammed that door shut with venomous disapproval from decades-old irritation. Often, when I hear harsh and hateful language like hers, I think to myself how much energy it takes to be so negative towards someone else. When we don't try to empathize with others, that type of negativity eats away at us from the inside. But it was great to hear that Angie refused to let those hurtful words and her birth father's inability to manage that situation control her. I'm Damon Davis, and I hope you found something in Angie's journey that inspired you, validates your feelings about wanting to search, or motivates you to have the strength along your journey to learn, who am I really?